Hello, my name is Ellen, and I want to cry a little. And to say, if something of the same ever happens in your life, don't blame yourself. You can't be responsible for everyone. I was always sure that my parents were good people. They loved me, provided me with everything I needed, and they often spoke usual words of parental support like, "You're the best," or "You can do it, baby, we believe in you." I almost had friendly communication with my mother. She helped me out with some everyday things, communication and psychology with others, especially boys. But I loved Dad more. I don't know why, although he spent most of his time at work. I can't recall anything like that in my childhood that would help me understand the reason for their behavior. Because, well, it was really great. Yes, I didn't have any cool and fashionable things like a scooter or an expensive phone. But this was explained quite simply. My parents simply didn't have money for that. Only my dad worked. A lot. Hard. And we had enough, but no frills. By the way, I also really like that my mom always spoke to me as an equal. Here's an example with the same money. She didn't hide anything. Just sat down and explained that Dad's salary is this amount of money. That's how much we pay in bills for the house, my studies, car, and taxes. This amount goes to food, and this part costs to put off, because winter is coming, and I'll need new clothes. So I understood that they didn't lie to me, just to get rid of me. But at the same time, I mastered the rules of housekeeping. As for me, a reasonable approach. Directly what I would like to explain to my kids as early as possible. At 15, I went to work for the first time. Well, a part-time summer job, to save money for my future graduation. Of course, there were still 3 years ahead, but I couldn't physically be able to spend time on something other than studying at school. And so in summer I worked, put something in a piggy bank, and then repeated as necessary. Then I just didn't pay attention to the discrepancy. The fact is that Dad promised they would take me as a part-time courier at his company. But in the end, I had to look for a place myself, almost at the last minute, because by that time Dad said that there would be no work. All decent summer vacancies for the school kids were already occupied. I didn't even think about blaming my dad. This wasn't his company, and he certainly couldn't influence the decision of his superiors. Actually, not. But then, I didn't know about it. In any case, I managed myself, and during the summer, I earned a whole $1,000, although I was only busy a couple of hours a day, with weekends and holidays. My parents praised me and told me not to give up after such a good start, and the question of my employment closed for a while. Later, I also earned and saved money in a piggy bank sometimes, and since I wasn't a spender, part of the weekly allowance was sent there, and a pretty decent amount, even too decent, was collected for graduation. The next problem was to enter college. The fact is that the university where we trained as paleontologists was the only one in the country, and the competition there was quite large. I could go to a budget-friendly place anywhere with my score, but I didn't exactly go there. My parents told me not to be upset, because everything was already thought out. On my birthday, they opened a personal bank account for me, and now there was enough money there to pay for my education. I believed, and didn't bother myself with submitting documents to other places. And then, I got a piece of news that was extremely painful. Mom once called me aside and said that there would be no money for study. It turned out that she and Dad never liked my idea of delving into the bones of dinosaurs, and they thought it would be nice to set me in the right way. It's good that this confession happened before I missed all the conceivable terms. It's also good that I really know how to save. There was enough money in my piggy bank to close the first year of study, so I decided not to give up my dream, and in the process, come up with something so that there was more money to pay. My parents were very unhappy, but honestly, at that moment, I didn't care much whether I pleased them or not, because I felt as betrayed as possible. I had to refuse the graduation, because there was no money to pay for it. Me, because there was nothing left for it, and my parents, just because of their principles. They bought a car with the deferred money, and lived happily. But okay, that's their right. Then it was difficult. I studied, and not only read books, but also went to excavations and other important events, while at the same time I worked, so that there was something to pay for my further studies. I lived, of course, in a student dorm, because I couldn't physically work enough to rent an apartment. And then, somewhere in the middle of the semester, my parents showed up. They said it was impossible to live normally in the dorm, and they decided to buy me an apartment. It seems like paying less for your own apartment than for a rented one, even less for a dorm, and it would be beneficial for everyone. Of course, I was delighted. I rushed to look for an apartment together with my mom, and I went to see the best and inexpensive ones. Anyway, I spent energy, time, and money on the journey, and of course, as a result, it ended, well, but it didn't end with anything. Here it is. At some point, my mom just went back to our city and started pretending she didn't offer me anything. Honestly, I simply have no trust in my parents. At all. Because what I've written is only large, really serious things. And how many small things were there, like buying a jacket, or I will bring you food, dear, when as a result, I had nothing. But the last story just killed me. This was a moment when I decided to give my parents one last chance for rehabilitation. And they failed. Not just with a bang. The core of the earth probably cracked from the impact. The fact is that my mom's car stood in the garage for a long time and nobody needed it. And then they decided that I can learn, get a license, and drive it. And everyone would be fine. I have a car, and they don't have taxes. And then it would be possible to sell the old car when I learned how to drive and buy something good and new. Basically, the plan was good, if it weren't for 2 butts in a row. To begin with, I needed to learn how to drive, and this cost money, and a pretty penny, I should say. And the time. At least a month in the evenings, I was consistently busy and I couldn't work. Plus, you still had to invest in a car. Although not too much. But anyway, you understand. But I decided to fix the relationship. I wanted to believe that my parents really cared about me. As a result, I found the time in my schedule to do what I, in fact, did not need to. By the way, I got the license the first time, because then I wouldn't be able to retake it physically. There wouldn't be any time. As soon as I got the license, I immediately transferred the necessary amount of money to my parents to repair the car, and began to wait. We agreed that my parents would do everything by themselves, and then Dad would bring the car to my city. And now I wait, and they sent me a video where they show how the repairing is going, so that everything was honest. And then they claimed they put the car up for sale. It turned out that someone told them that after the repairs, they could sell it for good money and get more than they expected. WTF. Then it was possible to draw an oil painting for my face, named like 100% Fool. I didn't even ask why it all started. Why did I spend my time for studying on it, getting into debt with my friends, and believed in the end? At my request at least to return the money for the repairs, my mom laughed and said that all the same, everything they got from the sale would be left to me. And I stayed broke for a couple of months before paying for my studies. Honestly, I don't know how I managed to get enough money. I practically didn't sleep at night. Besides my paperwork, I got a job as a bartender in a nightclub. They paid good tips, and I studied in between the lines, or when there were few people at work. Literally under the bar, I had notebooks with notes, and I spilled shots and looked in there. Anyway, everything was in a fog of tiredness from constant fatigue and chronic lack of sleep. But I did it. I repaid my debts on time and paid the next year for my studies. And on vacation, I went to my parents, but not out of love, but because there was nowhere else to go. I firmly decided that I would never believe them again. Then I began to live my own separate life and rarely met with my parents. I just couldn't listen to how they tell all my relatives that they selflessly helped me through life. In fact, I did everything myself. I studied, worked, bought an apartment on a mortgage because it was time to think about the future. Moreover, I never asked anyone for anything. Thank you, I already have one big nothing. And my parents don't understand why I never call them or ask for help. From time to time, this "my favorite" and "let us" pop up again, and I immediately hang up the phone. Because I know that in the best case scenario, everything would remain just talk. And in the worst one, I would get to pay money that I practically haven't got. And why do I need this? Recently, my mom had a new idea. It turned out all her friends already had grandchildren, and she wanted them too. She says she will definitely help me with the kids, so that I will normally finish my studies. And she'll help me with money too. I still have my account, yes. And I nodded and slowly packed my things. I have already agreed on a transfer at the university. The apartment is for sale, and as soon as the paperwork is over, I will fly to another country, across the ocean, so that I can no longer hear the famous, "Come on." Write in the comments whose parents are also masters of beautiful speech. Share the video with friends and family, and immediately learn to rely only on yourself, because if not you, then who else?